Hi, and great to see you all, and so many of you. And I'm really enjoying the fact that you are my influencers, so to speak, because you decide who gets chances, who don't. And I think that is really important if you think about the labor market. You decide. And if we have biases, or we don't acknowledge our biases, then the labor market got a big problem, right? And so I would like to talk about not only biases, but also my journey into biases. Because if you look at the pictures, you would think, well, she's really successful. She never engaged any biases. Indeed, I'm part of a managing board. I'm part of the supervisory board of KLM, of a lot of other social capital companies. I was top woman of the year in 2021. I have a family. I love D&I, and I love women from Africa. So I'm lots of time also spend my time in Africa and also in the Netherlands. And I have 2 kids. They are lovely most of the time. But I'm really now a little bit nervous because my daughter now has her math exam. And I am nervous. Oh, and I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous. I'm always looking at my phone like, is there something going wrong? Because this morning she went off with her scooter because I said, you need to go with the scooter, then you clear your mind and you're going to listen to some German, because this morning she had German, and listen to some German podcast, and then you will smooth into the exams. And then after 500 meters, she got a flat tire, really. Could you imagine what happened? She phoned me and said, I'm panicking, I've got a panic attack, Mom, you should help me. And I had a talk at 9:30 at Nijrode. So what do you do then, right? As a mom, but also as a business leader. Then you bring her, right? And then you have a good story at Nijrode. They weren't that happy. But I'm still nervous, right? I got her nerves into my system. So, well, I'm a little bit nervous still. But you should think, well, she's successful. Maybe she never encountered any biases. Well, I also had my journey. I was born in the rural part of the Netherlands, in eastern part of the Netherlands, in a really orthodox place. Really Christian, really orthodox. And I knew when I started to study, I was the first in my family to go to study. And I know that the first trimester, when I came home, one of the friends of my father said, what a pity and a waste of tax money, women studying. And he said that for the consecutive 4 years I went to study. And what it did with me is I shrank, right? I wasn't that vocal then. But there was a fire burning, like, sometime I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make it to the top, and you're the one who made me go to the top, right? So I thought it was fuel for myself. So that was the first time I actually encountered something in terms of biases. And then I got my second child, Thomas, and then my manager said to me, well, I don't think you're part of the potential program anymore, because now you have 2 kids and you have to take care of them as well. You don't have time to be in a potential program. Yes. I was like, this is not for real. I wasn't vocal then, but it was doing something with myself. I thought, this ain't going to happen. Then I applied for the CHRO job at KPN. And then on a Sunday night, I thought, I'm the most qualified, but I'm not going to be the preferred candidate. I felt it like an intuition. So I sent the CEO a text. I said, I feel there's something why you're not appointing me, but I think you should appoint me. And then he replied back 5 minutes, you're right, can you see me tomorrow morning at 7:30? So at 7:30, I was in my car with my Uggs. Uggs, you know, the boots. And I had my boots, I thought, in the back of my car. Do you have something like... Yeah. So I was like, oh, yeah, that was my reaction. But I thought I'm going with Uggs and I'm going to walk really, really cool. I did. And he was looking at me like, okay. And then I said, I want this job so badly. You should hire me. And then he said, yeah, I had a talk with my wife. And you know, I am divorced because I worked too much. And I want you to have a happy life. Really? He said it. And that was the first moment in my life when I sort of sat in my seat and said to him, this is the reason why you should hire me. You have no idea what's happening in your company. You have no idea the potential of so many underrepresented groups. You need me to be a successful CEO. And if you're not hiring me, you have a big problem. And then he looked at me a little bit afraid, and he said, you got the job. Really? So I was in my Uggs, walking the whole way back, and I knew all the secretaries were looking at me like, really? Is this the way you dress? Well, that was the first time I really thought, I'm going to change something. I felt the sort of view that I could change things. And I think that is why I'm so vocal about diversity and inclusion, so vocal about that we can change things, because a lot of people are underrepresented and cannot be or step up for themselves. And you can, we can, and we can do that together. And so I'm now part of the managing board, also really great. But there's also something really nice. During Corona, I was asked to give a talk about Prinsjesdag. It's the third Tuesday in September, where you give a talk. The whole government gives their talk about this is what we envision for the next period. And I was asked to do a talk about the economic situation in the Netherlands, about housing. So I was introduced. Look at this. Maybe you cannot read it, right? It's in Dutch. But it was Diederik Gommers, for instance, the guy who knows a lot about the coronavirus. He was introduced as the head of the academic world, really important professor, la 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 la. There was a really important person on the south of the Netherlands. I was introduced as Janine, married, mother of two. Really? This is, isn't this funny? No, it's not, and that's good. It's still the way people think of you. So the rest were introduced really with content and really sharp. And I had to do the economical vision on the Netherlands, and I was introduced as Janine, mother of two, married. Interesting. But this is still the case. So if you think in gender or underrepresented groups that we don't have a problem or it's going in the right direction, I question that, to be honest. And today, and I think it's great what the twins are doing, but what you all are doing if you think about breaking biases, because it's necessary for a lot of underrepresented groups. Does anyone have a question before I go into the content? Yes?
Thank you. When you're working in D&I, it's quite common to be an activist, but also be fueled by anger, which can also be quite consuming and exhausting. How did you overcome the anger part for yourself to be able to continue fighting for yourself and for the women that you were representing?
I think there was a moment where people thought I had a talk once with a talent manager, and he said to me, sometimes you come across that strong that people are afraid. And I said, well, if men do that, that's not a problem, right? Because men are wizards, women are witches. It's language, right? Wizard, witches. And wizard is great, but a witch is a bitch. And I think that subtle part, I thought, well, maybe I have to play the game different. So yes, I adjusted a little bit my tone. I literally, 1 year, I practiced sitting on my hands. When I got angry and I felt like it's coming, then I just sat on my hands. And that was a moment that I thought, wow. And I thought about cows, because that makes me relaxed. I really envisioned cows, I did. And there was a time, oh, I'm not now sharing strange things, but there was a time when I had my own cushion in my purse. And when there were only men in the room and you couldn't adjust your seat, I put in the cushion and I sat up straight. So that was the moment for me when I felt assured and not angry, but I think I was empowered. And I think if you feel the empowerment in yourself, because nobody wants to deal with angry people, because it makes them afraid. And you're sometimes afraid of yourself as well, right? So the first thing I did is letting the fuel go a little bit and turn it into something where I thought, if this is my vision, I should not be too angry. And it took me, I think, 5-6 years to not be that angry anymore. And turn that fuel into something positive and helping actually things go forward. And then you start to get energy and think, this is the right direction. So there's also a balance between how do you adjust and how do you stay yourself and not be, that is, I think, the biggest sort of dilemma in diversity and equity and inclusion. Other questions? Well, biases are normal. Maybe you've seen this riddle. This riddle was asked kids between 7 and 17. You, of course, know the riddle, right? Yes, it's a woman. Only 15% of the kids actually unraveled the riddle at once. So that means biases already start at a younger age. Because if you Google scientist or science, then you only get in the images men, right? So that is the envision of the kids already thinking it is a male or it is something which I am not. And so they're not choosing to go into science, for instance. So that is really, really important. And then the question is, where do you stand? Where do you stand if you think about biases, if you think about diversity, equity, inclusion? And this is maybe a little bit personal, but could you stand up, or daring enough to stand up and say, well, I'm still in the unconscious zone. I mean, I'm here today to listen, to learn. I was unconscious about biases. I'm now a little bit more conscious, but I was unconscious. Somebody daring enough to stand? Because it's okay. Like it. You get it. No, stand up. Stand up. Stand up, it's okay. And then second, who say, I'm conscious. I'm conscious, I was not aware that much, but I'm stand up, it's good to have some energy, right? You're conscious now. Cool. And then the number 3, the active. People say, I'm doing a lot about access. The majority. The majority, cool. Cool. And who would say I'm in number 4? And 4 is proponent, and that means that you are not only conscious, active, but you're actually a sort of activist, that you actually have that urge to challenge every situation and say, I don't agree, this is bias, or you're courageous enough to stand up in every situation which is not right. Cool. Cool. And so, most people are between 1 and 2. Be aware of that. So if you're a number 4, most of the times you will be disappointed. So if you're a number 4, you have to learn to live with disappointment. But keep on doing that, right? And it's not because people don't want, but there are actually 3 things in science One is beliefs based on exclusion. For instance, Black Pete. I grew up in a city where it was normal not to think about something is wrong with Black Pete. I didn't think of it. My parents didn't think of it. When the discussion started, I thought, there's something really wrong with Black Pete. And I think so inclusive, I thought, but I was never, because this was my upbringing. It was normal, but it's not normal. And so a lot of people actually in their upbringing get a lot of sort of exclusion already ingrained in their system. Second thing is you live in your own bubble. I feel that as well. You live in your bubble, you think, oh, this problem is not too big because I have this, or I don't see that. I read it in the newspapers, but it's not really real. And the third part, I think it's a really big part, is fear to lose privileges. And a lot of people are afraid to lose their privilege. And so you are maybe a mirror at their fear to lose something. And we all have fears. There's nothing wrong about fear. But if you don't acknowledge the three, you will not step up in 1, 2, 3, or 4. Questions? Also interesting research is Esther Mollema asked 650 nearly people and said, the participants, do you equally prefer people with dark or light skin as leaders? And so what people say is no, 99%, right? And then they did an implicit bias test. Whom of you did the Harvard bias test? Interesting, right? This one was the implicit test as well, so you cannot cheat, so to speak. And this was the outcome. Shocking, right? Because what you now see is that people have a preference, a big preference, right? And even more than 50% strongly have a preference. So if you think you don't have a preference, but actually we do. And what is also interesting is there's no difference between men and women, so they don't have a preference. No difference in level of education. So a lot of people say, oh, well, higher education, they have less because they know more. No, there's no difference. Young people, applaud to you, have slightly less biases because they're more educated on biases. And people surrounded by people from different cultural backgrounds or grew up in a more cultural, bicultural background show less bias. And then on women. So Dutch managers say men and women are equally suited as leaders. 95%. So it's even a little bit less. Like 5% state no, women are less, or men are better, right? And there they asked the same. And there it was even more. So this is reality. You're looking here at reality. Is it shocking, or do you... It's a shocking outcome, right? It's still shocking. And it's 2021, right? So it's not, she published it 2021. So it's not like it's the 1800s. It's 2020, right? So that is interesting. So the bias is, so you talked about today is the problem is not that we are biased. The problem is if you don't think you are biased. So if you don't think you're biased and you think, well, I don't treat people from a bicultural background different, or I don't treat women different, it's not the case. It's not. So in terms of if you are a recruiter, it's really important that you recruit with in mind that you maybe have biases as well. And that is really interesting. I have that myself as well. When I recruit someone and I am in an interview, then some words you see as different, right? So if a woman says, well, I don't know for sure, but I think, or I feel, those words matter, and they matter. And also with the partner you're sitting next to, it's so interesting to see if that's a man, it's different. It is, in my instance, for instance, because I have a bias towards women. I have. You had a question. Yes? Yes, but it was not significant. And that I was shocked. If there was a difference between men and women, but it was not significant. So a lot of women prefer men as well. Because I think we were raised, or I was raised, with fairy tales. And in fairy tales, men are really powerful, and they hunt, and they gather, and they're really tough. And women have really nice hair, and they're looking for a prince, and they're sitting on a chair. I think, to be very honest, that masculine part is ingrained from the moment. I mean, what happened when Disney really had a princess with a dark skin, the reaction on little children, seeing their resemblance, their role models, really made me emotional. I mean, you're looking for role models, and if the role model is a princess who's white and blonde, but if you grow up that way, you have that bias, you do. So also women have a bias, most of them, towards hiring men.
As a recruiter, I often use the gender bias decoder. So these are tools that you find online, you basically screen your vacancy.
Oh, cool.
And the thing is that the word leader is not recommended to be used because it's not inclusive enough. So do you think we should actually change the language, or we should keep up with the same language with the risk of not attracting women, for example, using the word leader like in this case?
Oh, that's interesting. What do you think? Do you think there comes a time where we have so many leaders from so many different backgrounds that leadership is, and that we have like fairy tales where it's the other way around, or that we start at an early age already? Also, why are there not great female artists in the world, right? We don't teach history. I asked my daughter how many. She has her history exam next week, and I said, "How many women did you encounter this week?" And she said, "None." So the question is, I think it's a really good question. What would you do?
I will keep using the word leader.
Yeah.
Hoping that, like the phrasing in general will make it inclusive enough to actually mean that we are attracting anyone.
Yes.
And keep using it until the message is clear.
What does the rest feel or think?
We did it here.
Do you think we should adjust the word leaders? Do you think we should adjust language? You're nodding, yes. Do you think we should adjust language? Yeah? No? Words? Yes.
I come from skilled islands in which the language is called a low resource language. There are significantly less words to express all the nuances of complexity of reality.
Yes.
So you actually see people getting stuck with a bottleneck of not being able to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah, communication is key. And also in your ads or what you do, is it so maybe looking in your company, I remember that. I met with a linguist really looking into you, how do you communicate, how do you do your ads, how do you do your recruitment. I think it's really important. I take that one with me as well. I get a lot of questions, you as well. Yeah, nice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but what is it business-wise, right? Who gets the question? Like, it's nice to have, not a must-have. Well, I think we have done great research within Rabo Research, it's an independent research firm. We didn't say it was a diversity and equity and inclusion survey. So we asked our mid and large-size customers, we asked them all kinds of questions about their revenue, about their income, about their cost, about whatever, their innovation. And yes, we asked some questions about, do you have preference for majority candidates? Do you have a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy? That kind of questions. And what came out, not surprisingly, but actually really nice to show, it's open research, that inclusion, so companies who say we don't have preferences for majority candidates, they actually have less vacancies to fill. So that is something which is really rational. The second thing what we found out, I think really nice, is that those companies who had DEI policies and didn't have a preference for majority candidates actually had an increasing total revenue the last 3 years. And we see the revenues, right? We're a bank, so we can actually, it's not that like they said they had the revenues. This is research which is really validated, and I love it. So now I said, if you want more productivity, you should have more inclusion. I think it's really interesting, yes. And then the last side is also that we foresee, on basis of intelligence, that they will have more turnover and more revenue in the coming 3 years. So it's not only nice to have diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's a must-have. So I love it. And it's publicly, so you can get it. And if you're, for instance, DEI officer, and everyone always asks, what are the numbers? Do you have proof that it works? Well, it does. Sorry, you had a question.
Yes. How did you measure the preference for a majority candidate or not? How did you measure it? Was it also based on people saying that they had a preference or not? Or because then, of course, it can be biased. So
yeah, but we did all kinds of. I can link you if you're interested with the person who did the research, because she really looked at the questions. Because if you just ask like, do you preference people, do you preference men, then everybody's like same with the Harvard bias test. No, so she did a lot of implicit questions, and it's really cool. Her name is Suzanne Bijkerk, and she's got really nice data, because it's essential that we work on this, because it's also worthwhile, a lot of money. So what we saw, a larger pool of possible employees, problem-filling vacancies was larger. They also have better management, so their employees also scored the organization, which was more inclusive, as better managers. Also interesting. And what interesting enough is they had diversified customer, supplier, product-based. Also interesting. So if the outside world you're working with, your clients are more diverse, you become more diverse as well, because you want to be a resemblance of your customers. So it's also interesting, our whole society is becoming more diverse. Why is that not the case in organizations yet? Well, maybe, given the time, I have so many great research. But what do we do within Rabobank? For me, there are two sides. There's structural inclusion, it's global DEI policies, diversity boards, biases training. I have 2 KPIs on diversity. One on gender, but it's not female related, it's diversity in teams. So all teams should have 30-70. So for instance, I always reported dark green because I have a bias for women. So I had a lot of women in my team. And now I also have men because I have a KPI, which is 70-30. So I also should hire 30% men. So I now have that. That is the way data works. I think I love it. And it's good to have KPIs. We also have a KPI. I also have a KPI on non-Western, people with a non-Western background. That was 3%. Within our organization, it's now 11%, and I have a KPI on 15%. That are my 2 KPIs of 8 KPIs. So 2 are on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and our whole board is on the 2 KPIs. And I think it works. And also on the behavioral inclusion, you should do a lot, and we're not nearly there. We discriminate as well. We do things, and I think we should, that is fuel to do things better. That's how I feel. And I have a talk with my recruiters as well. We have a lot of recruiters. And some are in phase 1 as well, if you think about biases. So we have to work on that as well within our own organization. And I think in terms of leadership, or we here, we can do a lot. We as role models, we as people who want to change something, you as HR professionals, or maybe DEI professionals, or maybe recruiters or talent acquisition, we can change something, and we can be an advocate for a better world. And it's not only a better world, but it's also a more sustainable world. It's also where we don't talk about food waste, but human waste. And there's a lot of human waste going on, and we should do something about it. So it all starts with us giving the right examples, and we can do that. And thank you for doing that. And let's change that better world. Thank you very much.